Welcome to the Tinfoil Rabbit Hole. My name is Steve. I'm coming to you, of course, from deep down within our tinfoil rabbit hole. This podcast is brought to you by the Insensitive Network. You can find it on their website, insensitivenetwork.com, as well as on Spotify, Spreaker.com, iTunes, Google Music, and others. Be sure to subscribe for the latest episodes. This, of course, is the midweek episode, so it's Sans Persona, No White Rabbit. He is still doing his research for his new shows, which are released every Saturday. And of course, the midweek episodes are really geared just towards some headlines and interesting tinfoil bits that I've come across and felt like I should share with you. This is episode 5.5. I have questions, and you should too. Okay, so we're going to get right into this. The white rabbit has sequestered, self-quarantined himself for the next 14 days or so, I think. I don't know. He's down deep in his tinfoil rabbit hole. We're just going to jump right into this today, and like everybody else, we're just talking about the coronavirus. So, now, according to the Chinese state-sponsored news, the Hunan seafood market was closed on January 1st, 2020 for, quote, regulation. In that consortium's report of January 24th, it was stated that the Hunan seafood market had been closed for cleaning and disinfection. However, the virus could only stay on surfaces for so long, so this was useless. That's their quote. On January 2nd, we're going to start seeing things ramping up here. On January 2nd, 41 individuals were admitted to the hospital. Patients in Wuhan, China, were confirmed to have contracted, and this is a laboratory confirmation, the 2019 novel coronavirus. 27 or 66% of patients had direct exposure to the seafood wholesale market. All 41 patients were subsequently relocated from the hospital they had originally been diagnosed in to another hospital in Wuhan, China. On January 3rd, 2020, Chinese scientists at the National Institute of Viral Disease Control and Prevention determined the genetic sequence of the novel genus coronavirus, naming it 2019 novel coronavirus, blah, 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 from the specimens collected from patients, and 3 distinct strains were established. There's something interesting right there that's kind of buried. They established and found that there were 3 distinct strains, not just one, but 3. Health authorities in Wuhan reported 44 cases. That was a big jump from 27 reported the day before. 11 of the 44 were seriously ill, and at that point they had not reported any deaths. The health of 121 close contacts of the cases were just being monitored. Let's see, what else do we have here? Staying on January 3rd, 2020, Dr. Li Wenliang, the Wuhan ophthalmologist, if you remember, who originally kind of came up with this thing here, he had been arrested for spreading false rumors on WeChat. He was summoned to the Wuhan Chinese Public Security Bureau, where he was told to sign an official confession and admonition letter promising to cease spreading false rumors regarding the coronavirus. Now, in the letter, he was accused of making false comments and had severely disturbed the social order. The letter stated, quote, "We solemnly warn you, if you keep being stubborn with such impertinence and continue this illegal activity, you will be brought to justice." Is that understood? And I think we all know what being brought to justice in China really means. Dr. Lee signed the confession saying, of course, yes, I understand. Lee would later be supported in a blog run by China's Supreme People's Court on January 28th, 2020. And on February 7th, 2020, the Chinese state-sponsored news reported that Dr. Lee had died from complications arising from his infection to the Wuhan coronavirus, only to later delete that post and report that he was in critical condition. He was subsequently confirmed the same day as having regrettably indeed deceased. So they said he died, and then they said, no, not really. He's actually just really, really sick. And then they came back and they said, yeah, we kind of lied. He did die. Dr. Lee is probably the original whistleblower on this entire fiasco that we have going on. And he alone is probably also responsible for exposing the Chinese government's early efforts to cover up the seriousness of this coronavirus, which had the potential to cause a worldwide pandemic. I think at this point in time, it's fairly important to kind of point out that I know that there have been some individuals within the media, some people in the media, reporters in general. There's some stations too as well. I'm not going to name them. You know who they are. You watch them. You watch them or you don't watch them, and you see clips from the stations that are not doing this, but whatever. To say that this is not a Chinese virus, or to somehow imply that this virus is to call it Chinese is racist, is absolutely pure bunk. There is every reason in the world to believe and call it a Chinese virus. Now, we still don't even know whether or not this virus actually came from the seafood market. I think the general consensus out there among most mainstream scientists who have been studying this thing for a while now is that this is not something that came from the seafood market. I don't think that they've actually gone so far as to say that it was genetically modified, but I think there's a strong chance that this particular virus is something that the Chinese government has been working on at that lab that was located not too far from that fresh food market. Blaming it on the fresh food market was a fairly easy way for the Chinese government to say, hey, we didn't have anything to do with this. This was a virus that just kind of, it mutated, and just like a lot of other coronaviruses, jumped from one species to another. It jumped from a bat to humans, and now, that's the way it is. And let's not lose sight on the fact that that there were 3 strains that were identified. 3. So to say that this was something that was just a naturally occurring freak of nature, I don't believe is plausible in any sense of the imagination at all. January 4th, the head of the University of Hong Kong Center for Infection, a gentleman by the name of Ho Pak Leung, warned that the city, he's referring to Wuhan, should implement the strictest possible monitoring system for a mystery new viral pneumonia that infected dozens of people. It was highly possible that the illness was spreading from human to human. The microbiologist also warned that there could be a surge in cases during the upcoming Chinese New Year. Ho said that he had hoped the mainland would release more details as soon as possible about the patients infected with this disease, such as their previous medical histories, and give that information to help experts analyze the illness and allow for more effective preventative measures to be put in place. Interestingly enough, it was on the same day, January 4th, the Singapore Ministry of Health said that they had their first suspected case of the, quote, mystery Wuhan virus in Singapore. And it was in a 3-year-old girl from China who had a travel history to the city of Wuhan. So, so this little girl in Hong Kong got the Chinese virus. This timeline is just absolutely depressing. So by January 5th, the number of suspected cases reached 59. They listed 79 as being in critical condition. They quarantined them all. Local officials started monitoring 163 of their contacts. They are claiming still on January 5th that there had been no reported cases of human-to-human transmission or presentation in healthcare workers. This is just, you can't believe this stuff. This is crap. If this thing came from a bat, which they originally said, somebody eating bat soup, what did they do? They mailed their bat soup to the 3-year-old girl in Hong Kong, or they sent some of their bat soup to their closest 59 relatives, and then those relatives shared it with 163 of their friends and relatives. And to say that there was no human-to-human transmission at this point was just absolutely screwed up beyond all belief. On Monday, January 6th, you got to love these timelines. You got January 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, it just goes on. On the 6th of January, Wuhan health authorities announced that they were continuing to seek the cause, but had so far ruled out influenza, avian flu, adenovirus, and coronaviruses such as SARS and MERS as the respiratory pathogen that had infected those 59 people the day before. January 7th. January 7th, it was really kind of when the outburst in social media discussion on this strange pneumonia-like outbreak in Wuhan, China, really started to take hold. The Chinese government, doing what the Chinese government does, censored the hashtag Wuhan SARS, and of course they were now investigating. We know what investigating means. Anyone who was allegedly spreading this misinformation about this so-called outbreak on social media. To be noted, January 7th, most of the world was still continuing to wait for China to disclose more information about what had triggered this unexplained pneumonia-like outbreak in Wuhan. Wuhan, by the way, is China's, it's their 10th largest city. So, it is not, when you look at the population of China, it is not a small city. Interestingly enough, on January 7th, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, they issued a travel notice for people going to Wuhan and the Hubei province, primarily explicitly due to the unknown cases of, unknown pneumonia. On January 8th, scientists in China announced the discovery of a new coronavirus. Boy, those Chinese scientists, they're just brilliant, aren't they? South Korea at that point also announced their first possible case of the virus coming from China. They put a 36-year-old Chinese woman under isolated treatment amid concerns that she had brought the virus back and had probably sickened dozens, not only in mainland China and Hong Kong in the previous weeks, but had obviously been in contact with other people within South Korea. This woman who worked for a South Korean company near the capital of Seoul, when she came back, she was experiencing the typical cough and fever. She was over in China, by the way, for 5 days on December 30th, which you can go back to the beginning of this podcast and listen to what happened on December 30th. She had spent some time in China. Interestingly enough, she had not visited the Wenan seafood market. So once again, the seafood market thing is just a load of hooey. So this timeline actually goes on for quite a while. Obviously, it comes up to the current day, but really from about January 6th, which is when the CDC issued the travel ban to Wuhan, China, is really when when it started to go into a worldwide type of situation, and people got really nervous about what was going to happen with this. And the Chinese government wasn't overly cooperative with providing any information. And I think what we've seen now over the last couple of weeks is we, at least in this country, and obviously there have been other countries that have been more highly impacted at the moment than the U.S. has. Obviously, Italy, Russia, Singapore, South Korea. There's hot spots all over the place. But I continue to have my questions about this virus, and I don't believe that I'm getting any straight answers from any of the news media at all, which really shouldn't surprise anybody, right? I mean, in this country, our news media is not that much different from news medias in other countries. They are a part and portion of the government. The news medias will tell you what the government wants them to report so that they can keep control of the population. So I had a post recently on Facebook that I had put up. This thing has ramped up from just kind of like a warning about traveling to an almost full-blown shelter-in-place type of scenario within this country. And the damage that this virus is doing, to me, seems like it's going to be small compared to the damage that it's going to be doing or has already done to our society. I mean, we literally went in this country from having one of the biggest booms, both from manufacturing and economics and the number of people who have jobs and all that good stuff, to almost a complete standstill. What I've seen over the course of the last few weeks is I have seen a concerted effort by the government to slowly ramp up the restrictions that they wanted to put in place immediately, but knew that if they had, it would have caused mass chaos everywhere. If the government had come out, if President Trump had come out and had issued a close everything, workers stay home, essential businesses open only, shelter in place in your house until further notice, this country would have flipped. And let me tell you something. We currently, right now, are probably 3 or 4 key elements away from this entire population in the United States going from what it seems to be, at least right now, relative calmness to absolute chaos. Those things are power fuel, internet, and probably food. Power, food, fuel, and internet. If we lose one or more of those services or access to those services, people are going to freak. Because right now, everybody's just kind of happy. They're staying at home. They're binging on their Netflix. I know my internet sucks lately because everybody else is on it. But they're sitting at home. We had an initial run on, the basic goods, toilet paper. For whatever reason, people felt like they needed to have 17,000 rolls of toilet paper. That's fine and dandy. Okay, everybody got that out of their system. But if we were to lose power right now in the city, people would freak. If we were to lose internet right now, people would freak. If we were to have long gas lines, or if gas all of a sudden, actually gas right now in this country is probably the lowest it's been in quite a while. I'm here in the Northeast, in the western portion of New York State. And our average unleaded is it's actually fell a little bit over the past couple of days because of the Chinese, or because of the Russian and Saudi pricing dispute over oil. I think when I saw gas the other day, I think it was $2.37 or $2.38, depending on where you went, somewhere around that neighborhood. So gas is actually pretty cheap. So that means that people can still stay mobile. Why they would want to be mobile, I don't know. I think that President Trump has done a fantastic job at controlling the population, and I say that, and I use that word deliberately, controlling the population, because if there was no control of the population, if he had come out and had imposed these travel bans and restrictions coming in and out of the country over the borders of like Mexico and Canada, as well as people coming in from air travel, while also forcing most non-essential businesses to close and send their people home, and advising people to stay in their house and not come out until we tell you that it's safe to, I think that you would have had a very, very, very bad situation. And I think that we can still get to that point. I'm in New York State, Governor Cuomo. I am not a big fan of Governor Cuomo at all. I never have been. I will honestly say that this is probably the first time that I can actually listen to the governor without puking my brains out. He's been reasonably tempered with what he's done, but I'm also recognizing that the restrictions that the governor and other governors of other states across the country have been putting in place have been a slow build-up to essentially what we have today. Today, the governor came out and pretty much said all non-essential employees for non-essential businesses should not be at work. There should be no unnecessary travel while it's not a travel ban. There should be no unnecessary travel to places that you don't need to go. If you don't need to go to your grocery store, then don't go out. If you don't need to go to the drugstore to pick up your medications, then don't go out. He's put restrictions on the hours of operations that restaurants can stay open till, the number of people that can gather in places, and we pretty much have today a shelter in place. While I don't believe he's actually used that term, shelter in place, the implication is still the same, shelter in place. So the question that I have is, where do we go from here? Not an easy answer to come up with. We know that this thing is just starting to get underway in this country, and I think that the number of people that are infected is extremely higher than what we're being told. And with all fairness to the government officials that we see out there, the talking mouthpieces that are giving us the news, that is a logical conclusion and a very reasonable conclusion to come up with, because not everybody has been tested. So unless you're going to test every single individual within this country, there is no way to say that definitively that this virus is either reached its peak, is on its decline, or is still climbing. I believe the general consensus from most of the experts is that this is still on the incline. A couple of things that really kind of disturb me, though. I know President Trump has dispatched one of the hospital ships to New York City. New York City is a pretty large city, and there are, I think it may actually be the largest population in the United States. I may be wrong on that. If it's not the largest, it's certainly in the top 3, that's for sure. New York City I've been to quite a few times, and New York City proper is obviously different from, obviously if you go down into Manhattan or the Bronx or wherever. There are hospitals all over the place. I can't tell you how many beds there are, but I can tell you that there's a lot of beds. There's a lot of hospitals, and there's a lot of beds. When I see a floating state-of-the-art hospital, military hospital, which I've read that it I believe it has 1,000 beds capacity, probably more. Probably more than that. That concerns me. When you don't believe that you have the capacity to handle the number of people who are going to be sick or who are already sick, and you need to employ an asset such as a floating hospital ship, that definitely concerns me. And that concerns me for a number of reasons. I guess my first question is whether or not this virus is still contagious after somebody passes away. I would assume the answer to that question is yes. So, where are they putting the bodies? Are they going to bury the bodies? Are they going to burn the bodies? Do the bodies need to be burned? Are they bringing in the hospital ships so that they can take these critically ill individuals who are going to die and dump them into the sea? You might think that sounds crude and cruel and crass, but when push comes to shove and reality becomes reality, sometimes we need to do things as a species that we don't necessarily like to talk about or think that we are capable of doing, but there is always that possibility. Another one of these ships, I believe, is being dispatched to the West Coast. What happens in the middle of the country? What happens to the small businesses in this country that have been forced to close for these health concerns? What happens to the people who need to, who work at these businesses, who need to pay their bills? I know they're talking about a stimulus package and putting in, whatever it is, $1,000 or $1,200 for every adult, or $500 for every child, or whatever the case may be. Are these politicians so out of touch that they really think that $1,000 is going to help somebody who's going to be potentially out of work for 3, 4, 5 weeks? Maybe they won't be going back to work at all. I have a local town near me. There was an article on a local news website, and she had planned on opening. She had invested all of her money, as well as getting small business loans, into opening up a pastry, cake, cupcake shop. And the week that she was supposed to open was unfortunately coincided with when the restrictions on the number of people that could gather and the number of employees that could be at a place were allowed to have. And those restrictions, something that, and I mentioned it earlier, but something to think about again, is these restrictions, they get higher and higher and higher every day. And they do that for a reason, people. They do that so that you do not think that things are out of control when things really are out of control. In fact, they do that because they don't know how out of control things really are. Going back to this pastry shop, anyway, she has not been able to open. There obviously was a great community response to this, and people were calling her shop and ordering things, and she was delivering them to her at curbside, which is great. I'm not necessarily sure that's the smartest use of my money at the moment. I'm not necessarily sure that that's the smartest use of anybody's money at the moment. I understand that people like their takeout. They like their cupcakes and cakes and their Starbucks and their McDonald's and their Burger Kings and their, whatever insert chain restaurant here or local favorite restaurant there. But when these people aren't working, at some point in time, this money runs out. So, again, I applaud the community effort, but I'm not necessarily sure that that's I know that for myself, that is not the smartest move for me to make with my money, because money in this country, while the government may tell you, don't worry about it, things will be fine, we'll take care of you. I worry when the government says that they're going to take care of me. I am a small business owner. I do not receive a paycheck. My business is pretty much dropped down to zero. If I can't travel and go on site someplace, then the work that I do has to be remote. Fortunately, I'm in IT. I can do some work remotely, but even the remote work that I do has pretty much dropped by about 70%. And there's businesses out there that are just not opening. They can't open. They can't function with 25% of their staff. They can't function with 50% of their staff. They can't function at all. So if you want to stop the bleeding from the financial aspect as a business owner, you need to cut as much spending as you possibly can, because without income, there is no spending. And using the restaurant lady or the pastry lady as an example, it's great that the community was able to come together for her and purchase her products, and she was able to to make them, and obviously that has an effect on other small businesses within the area, because she needs to purchase supplies and all that other stuff. But let me tell you something, that shit only lasts for so long. There needs to be some kind of resolution on this, and currently right now we do not have a resolution on this. We don't know whether or not this is going to be for 14 days, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks. I've heard 8 weeks bantied about on a number of occasions. And when I hear 8 weeks, the first thing that I think of is summer. Being in the Northeast, we have a limited amount of summer. It's not like we're in Miami and we have sun and sunshine and very nice weather, very tempered weather the entire year. Our summers here, we're lucky if we get 8 good weeks of summer. I'm talking like July and August. Now picture sheltering in place for 8 weeks, your entire summer. Everything's been canceled. Everything's been canceled. All the shows have been canceled. The festivals have been canceled. In the city I'm in, they actually announced last week, and I was actually completely taken aback by this, but they announced last week that they're closing schools until April 20th. April 20th. That is a long time. In this area here, we don't have year-round schools. By the time you get to the end of May, beginning of June, somewhere around there, most of the schools that are in session, you're talking about, your high school students that are taking, their final exams for the year. There's probably, half days. It's the school year is pretty much winding down at that point. So you have to wonder that, if you're going to postpone it till April 20th, are you really going to be opening the schools up at all? There is no clear cut. There is no clear cut way to tell how long this is going to last. And I think that everybody should hunker down and prepare for this thing to last the entire summer. I hate to say it. I would love to be able to say that, things are looking up and that we're on the upside, but I'm not hearing that from the governmental officials, and they're not putting stricter enforcements and stricter guidelines in place on what you can and can't do, where you can and can't go, how many people you can have or not have at your establishment or in a public venue or whatever the case may be. They're not putting those restrictions in place on a daily basis and tightening them on a daily basis to say, let's say next week Tuesday, all of a sudden turn around and say, yep, we're all good, everybody can go back to normal. This is not going to be a light switch where you just flip it and everything is just going to go back to normal. They can talk stimulus packages as much as they want to. There are going to be people that are going to feel this. They're going to feel these repercussions from this for weeks, months, and possibly even longer than that. A year, maybe 2 years. There's people out there that have small businesses that are going to close their small businesses, and when things go back to normal, they will not be able to reopen their small business. They're going to be looking for jobs. There are corporations out there that are going to realize that maybe they didn't need as many people that they had before, and they're actually going to be cutting down on the number of jobs that they have. There is obviously going to be an uptick in the number of remote workers that you see out there. I myself, being in IT, have promoted remote workforces for well over 15 years. We've had the capability to do that for quite a long time, and the capabilities that we have from a technology standpoint right now are far better than what we had then, and a remote workforce makes so much more sense. And very honestly, from a personal perspective, I think it makes a much happier person to begin with, and a more productive person as an employee as well. I think we need to relook at the way that we handle our schools. I have said for years that, and I have been a huge proponent about this, but I have said for years that if I can earn my master's degree online, I see absolutely no reason why the majority of our educational system, going from, say, you can even go all the way down to from kindergarten to seniors in high school, why we spend the money that we spend to bus and house and pay these teachers and support this educational system, which is just completely antiquated. These students today, they spend all of their time online to begin with in the first place, and the financial savings that school districts would pass along to the communities in the form of the school taxes and stuff that individuals pay, as well as the transportation costs and everything associated with it. The amount of money that could be saved by having remote education be the norm, not the abnorm, but the norm. Just to me, it makes more sense than you could possibly imagine. So I'm pretty long on this episode. There wasn't a whole lot of tinfoil here. It really was just kind of a depressing timeline. Some of my thoughts. Drop a line. Let me know what you think. Tinfoil at insensitivenetwork.com. I thank the Insensitive Network for putting this podcast out. Give a listen to Sam Logsden's podcast this week. She has some great back episodes, so if you're looking for something to listen to that maybe you haven't listened to before, give her a shot. She's got some really great podcasts up there. The White Rabbit, he'll be back. Don't know if he'll be back tomorrow, but the White Rabbit will be back. We'll try to have another episode out shortly, but like everybody else, I'm taking it one day at a time. So my name is Steve, and this is the Tinfoil Rabbit Hole. Today it was a little less tinfoil, a little more rabbit hole, but that's the way things work out sometimes. Don't forget to subscribe if you like this episode. We also have merchandise that you can check out. Again, that's insensitivenetwork.com. You can take a look at our great merchandise with our wonderful logo. Love the logo. Looks great. Also, don't forget to visit insensitivenetwork.com, and you can find some great other podcasts there. Happy Ever After Party by Sam. A wonderful program. If you like this one, I'm sure you're going to enjoy that one. This is Steve for the Tinfoil Rabbit Hole.
Where the hell is Tesla?